Long, long ago, there was a village called Onam. It was a beautiful place. The trees were tall and full of green leaves. The rivers were clean and cold. The soil was so good that anything you planted in it would grow big and strong. The people of Onam were hard workers. Every morning, before the sun was even fully in the sky, they were already out in their farms, bending their backs, planting seeds, pulling weeds, and singing soft songs to themselves as they worked. They were not rich people, but they had enough. They had yam and corn and vegetables. They had fruit from the trees. They had fish from the river. The children were fat and happy. The old men and women sat under the big trees in the evening and told stories while the little ones played around their feet. It was a peaceful life. But peace does not last forever when the wrong person is sitting on the throne. The king of Onam was a man named Obi, and King Obi was not a kind man. He was not a gentle man. He was not even a fair man. King Obi was the kind of man who smiled only when he was taking something from someone else. He sat in his big palace on top of the hill and looked down at all the people below him, and all he ever thought about was how to take more. It started with the tax. One dry afternoon, the king sent his guards through the village. The guards were big men with hard faces. They wore the king's colors and carried long sticks. They knocked on every door and called every farmer to come out and listen. When all the people were gathered in the middle of the village, one of the guards read out the king's new rule in a loud, flat voice. "From this day forward," the guard said, "every farmer in the village of Onam must give 70 out of every 100 crops they harvest to the king. This is the law. Anyone who refuses will face the king's punishment." 70 out of every 100, 70%. The people looked at each other with wide eyes. A woman at the back of the crowd whispered to her husband, "70? But if we give 70, what is left for us?" Her husband grabbed her arm quickly and told her to be quiet. He had seen what happened to people who spoke out. He did not want that to happen to his wife. So the people said nothing. They bowed their heads and went back to their homes. And from that day, every time the harvest came in, the king's men were already waiting at the edge of the farms, counting, measuring, and taking. 70 bags of yam out of every 100 went to the palace, 70 baskets of corn, 70 bunches of plantain. The king took, and the palace got fuller and fuller, while the people's own pots got emptier and emptier. The hunger started slowly. First, the older people skipped one meal a day. Then the younger people started doing the same. Then the children started looking thin. Their little stomachs were always making noise. Some nights, mothers would sit in the dark and cry quietly because they had nothing to feed their babies. Fathers who used to stand tall and proud now walked with their shoulders low and their eyes on the ground. And it got worse. There was a man in the village called Chike. Chike was a brave man, maybe a little too brave. He had watched his children lose weight for 2 full seasons. He had watched his wife's face grow thin and worried. And one day, he just could not take it anymore. He walked to the palace gates, and he stood there and he shouted, "This is not right. We are dying of hunger. The king is taking too much. We are people, not animals. We have rights." The whole village heard him. Children stopped playing. Women stopped pounding. Men froze where they stood. Everyone held their breath and waited. The king's guards came out within minutes. They grabbed Chike by both arms and dragged him inside the palace gates. The gates closed with a heavy metal bang. Chike was never seen again. After that, nobody said a word. Nobody complained. Nobody even whispered. The fear in the village was like a thick fog that never lifted. People walked with their eyes down and their mouths shut. Even when the hunger was so bad that their hands shook, they said nothing, because everyone remembered Chike. But there was one person in the village who was watching all of this very carefully. One person who saw every single thing that was happening. One person who felt something burning deep inside his chest every day. Not hunger, but anger. A quiet, slow-burning anger that grew a little bit bigger every single day. That person was Emeka, and Emeka was the king's own son. Emeka was 10 years old when his father made the tax law. He was a small boy with big, serious eyes. He lived in the palace, which meant he never went hungry. There was always food on his table, the same food that was taken from the people below. But Emeka could not enjoy it. Every time he put food in his mouth, he thought about the children in the village who were crying because their stomachs were empty. He thought about Chike, who had shouted for justice and disappeared. He thought about the look on people's faces when the king's men came to count their crops. He wanted to say something to his father. Many times he walked to the door of his father's chamber and raised his hand to knock, and then stopped. What was he going to say? He was just a boy. His father was the king. His father did not listen to anybody, and if even Chike, a grown man, had been made to disappear for speaking out, what would happen to a 10-year-old boy? So Emeka said nothing, but he made a promise inside his heart. He stood by the palace window one night, looking down at the dark village below, and he whispered to himself, one day I will fix this. I will free these people. I promise." He did not know it yet, but that quiet promise was the most powerful thing that had ever been said inside the walls of that palace. The years passed. Emeka grew taller. His father's rules grew harder. King Obi added new punishments for anyone who failed to pay the tax. If a farmer had a bad harvest season and could not give the full 70%, the king's men would take his farm tools. Sometimes they took his goats or chickens. Sometimes they took the roof from his house. One family was left sleeping in the open air for 3 months because they could not pay. The king sat in his palace and laughed. He told himself that this was how you kept control. You made people afraid. You made people weak. Weak and afraid people never cause trouble. But King Obi had forgotten one thing. He had forgotten that his son was watching, and his son was not becoming weak. His son was becoming something else entirely. 25 years passed. Emeka was now 35 years old. He was a tall, quiet man with a calm face and steady eyes. He was not the kind of man who raised his voice. He was not the kind of man who made big speeches. But when he walked into a room, people stopped and looked, because there was something about him, something in the way he carried himself that made you feel like this was a man who knew exactly what he was doing and exactly where he was going. He had spent those 25 years learning. He read everything he could find. He talked to the old men and women in the village whenever he could sneak out of the palace without his father knowing. He listened to their stories and their pain. He remembered every name of every person who had been punished. He kept it all inside him, like a man carefully carrying a full pot of water, making sure not to spill a single drop. And he had made a plan. There was a village far away from Onam, so far that it took many days of walking through deep forest and across wide rivers to get there. The village was called Oma, and Oma was famous for one thing above everything else: its warriors. The warriors of Oma were known all over the land. They had never lost a battle, not one. Other villages that had enemies would sometimes travel to Oma and beg for help, and if Oma agreed to fight for them, the battle was already as good as won. The warriors of Oma were trained from childhood. They were fast, they were smart, they were fearless, and their king, a man named Ibuka, was the most respected king in all the land. Emeka packed a small bag one evening when his father was busy in his chamber counting gold. He told nobody where he was going. He walked out of the palace quietly through the back gate and into the night. He walked through the village, past the thin children and the worn-out faces, past the farms with their signs of tiredness, past the river that used to be a place of joy and was now just a place people crossed quickly with their heads down. He walked and walked and walked. The journey to Oma was not easy. The forest was dark and full of strange sounds at night. He crossed 3 rivers, one of which was deep enough to reach his chest. He ate berries and fruit from the bush. He slept under trees. On the 4th day, it rained so hard that he had to find a hollow in a large rock and curl up inside it like a snail until the rain stopped. His clothes were wet and muddy, his feet were sore, but he kept going, because he had made a promise, and he had never forgotten it. On the 7th day of walking, Emeka finally arrived at the village of Oma. Even from the edge of the village, you could feel that this place was different. The people here walked with their chins up. There was a confidence in the way they moved, a quiet strength in their faces. Young men were training in an open field, running, jumping, sparring with wooden sticks, and even from far away you could see how good they were. Emeka walked to the palace of King Ibuka and asked to see the king. The guards looked him up and down. He was dirty from the journey. His clothes were torn in 2 places. He did not look like royalty. But there was something about his eyes, that calm, steady look, that made one of the guards go inside and come back a few minutes later to say, "The king will see you." King Ibuka was a big, quiet man, not loud, not showy. He sat on a simple wooden throne and looked at Emeka the way a man looks at a river before he decides to cross it or not, carefully, taking his time. "Who are you?" King Ibuka asked. "My name is Emeka. I am the son of King Obi of Onam, and I have walked 7 days through forest and rain to stand in front of you today, because my people are suffering and I need your help." There was a silence in the room. King Ibuka said nothing. He just waited, so Emeka told him everything. He told him about the 70% tax. He told him about the hunger. He told him about Chike, who had shouted for justice and disappeared. He told him about the children whose ribs were showing. He told him about the old people who were dying before their time because they were not eating enough. He told him about the mothers who cried in the dark. He told him about the fear that hung over the whole village like a cloud that never moved. He spoke for a long time, and when he was done, his voice was steady, but his eyes were wet. King Ibuka was quiet for a long moment. Then he asked just one question, just one. "If we help you remove your father from the throne, what will you do differently?" Emeka did not hesitate even for 1 second. "I will cancel the tax. I will feed the people. I will give every farmer back the crops that were taken from them, as much as I can. I will make sure that no one in Onam goes to sleep hungry again, and I will make sure that any man or woman can speak their mind without being afraid." King Ibuka looked at him for a long time. Then, slowly, a small smile crossed his face. He stood up and stretched out his hand. "Then we will help you," he said. "My warriors will march with you back to Onam." Emeka grabbed the king's hand with both of his and held it tight. He could not even find words. His throat was too full. He just nodded, and King Ibuka nodded back, and it was enough. The warriors of Oma prepared for 3 days. They checked their weapons. They planned the march. They talked about the best way to approach Onam without causing harm to the village people. Emeka sat with King Ibuka every evening during those 3 days, talking, planning, making sure everything was ready. On the 4th morning, they set off, a long line of strong, quiet warriors moving through the forest like a river that knows exactly where it is going.
King Obi was eating his breakfast when the news came. A guard ran into the palace dining room, breathing hard, his face full of fear. "My king," he said, "there is an army at the edge of the village, a large army. They are coming from the direction of Oma." King Obi put down his food slowly. He was not a man who showed fear, but behind his calm face, his heart was beating very fast. He knew what the warriors of Oma meant. He had heard the stories. Everyone had. He called his own guards together. He told them to get their weapons. He told them to stand firm. He told them that nobody was going to walk into his palace and take his throne. But then, something happened that King Obi did not expect. The people of Onam came out of their houses, not to run away, not to hide. They came out and they stood in the road and they watched as Emeka walked at the front of the line of warriors. And when they saw him, when they recognized the king's son, they did not look afraid. They looked something that they had not looked in a very long time. They looked hopeful. Word traveled fast through the village. The king's son had come back. He had brought help. He had come to end the suffering. Women grabbed each other's hands. Old men who had been sitting in their houses for years stood up and came to their doorways to watch. Children who had grown up knowing only hunger and fear stood on their toes to see over the heads of the adults in front of them. King Obi's own guards, when they saw what was coming toward them and when they looked at the faces of the people around them, hesitated. These were men from the village too. These were men with mothers and brothers and children who were also hungry. They had been following the king's orders because they were afraid of what would happen if they didn't. But now, standing there with their weapons in their hands, looking at the hope on the faces of their own people, many of them quietly put down their weapons and stepped aside. Not all of them, some fought. The battle inside and around the palace walls was short but sharp. The warriors of Oma moved with a speed and skill that left no doubt to doubt. Within an hour, it was over. King Obi's remaining guards were disarmed, the palace gates were open, and King Obi himself was found hiding in the back room of his chamber, behind a pile of heavy curtains, shaking. The guards brought him out into the main hall. He was still wearing his royal clothes, but they looked wrong on him now, too big somehow, as if the clothes had been made for a different person. He looked at his son standing in front of him, and his face did something complicated. Shame and anger and fear all mixed together. "Emeka," he said, and his voice came out smaller than he wanted it to. "You did this, your own father." Emeka looked at him for a long time without speaking. When he finally spoke, his voice was very quiet. "You made children cry from hunger, father. You made people disappear for telling the truth. You made an entire village afraid to even speak." He paused. "What you call what I did to you, I call it justice." Then Emeka did something that everyone in that hall would remember for the rest of their lives. He called a man to come forward, an old farmer from the village, a man whose farm tools had been taken 3 years ago, whose family had nearly starved. Emeka looked at this man and then looked back at his father and said, Tell him what his rules did to your family." The old farmer stood straight. His voice shook at first, and then it got stronger. He talked about the nights his grandchildren cried from hunger. He talked about burying a neighbor who had gotten sick because there was not enough food to keep him strong. He talked about the shame of not being able to feed his own family, even though he worked harder than any man should have to work. When the farmer was done, the hall was completely silent. King Obi's head was bowed. Emeka brought every person who wanted to speak. One by one they came forward. A mother, a young man whose brother had been beaten by the king's guards, an old woman whose husband had been the one who disappeared after speaking out. She came forward shaking, supported by her daughter, and she spoke in a thin, trembling voice about the day the guards took her husband away and how she had never stopped waiting for him to come home. For the first time in his life, King Obi sat and listened to the damage he had done, not because he wanted to, but because he had no choice. When it was all done, Emeka made his judgment. King Obi was to be imprisoned, not executed like he had done to others. Emeka was not his father, but he would spend his remaining days locked away, without the gold and the power he had spent his whole life collecting. He would live simply, quietly, with time to think about what he had done. King Obi was led away. He did not look back. That evening, Emeka walked outside to where the people of Onam were gathered in the open area in the center of the village. There were hundreds of them, old and young, men and women, farmers and traders and children. They were all looking at him. Some were crying, some were smiling, some were doing both at the same time. Emeka stood in front of them and he took a breath. "The tax is cancelled," he said. "Every crop you grow from now on is yours. Every fruit, every yam, every grain of corn belongs to you and your families. Nobody will take it from you." The sound that came from that crowd was something Emeka would never forget as long as he lived. It was not one sound, it was 100 sounds all at once. People crying out, people laughing, people grabbing each other and holding on. An old man at the front raised his hands to the sky and shouted something in the old language, a prayer of thanks that his grandfather's grandfather had taught him. A group of women started singing, not a sad song, not a work song, but a celebration song, the kind of song that had not been sung in Onam for a long time. Emeka turned to King Ebuka, who was standing a few steps behind him. He reached out his hand, and King Ebuka shook it firmly. "I will never forget what you did for these people," Emeka said. "I promise I will come and visit you, and whatever you need, whatever Oma needs, you have a friend in Onam." King Ebuka smiled, a real, warm smile. "Take care of them well," he said. "That is all the thanks I need." The warriors of Oma began their journey home the next morning. The people of Onam lined the road to see them off, giving them fruit and yam and whatever food they had. It was not much, not yet, because the hunger had been long, but it was given with full hearts, and that made it more than enough. 3 days later, Emeka was crowned king of Onam. It was not a loud ceremony, it was not a flashy one. Emeka had asked for something simple. He sat down on the throne, and the village elder placed the crown gently on his head, and the people of Onam cheered. Really cheered, not the kind of cheering you do because you are told to, but the kind that starts somewhere deep inside you and cannot be stopped. Things did not change overnight. Hunger does not go away in one day just because the rules have changed. It took time for the farms to recover. It took time for the people to stop flinching every time they heard a guard walk past. It took time for the children to understand that nobody was going to take their food away. But slowly, steadily, season by season, Onam came back to life. The farms grew full again. The markets were loud and busy again. Children played in the streets without fear. Old people sat under the trees in the evening and told stories again. And now, the stories they told included a new one. A story about a boy who watched and waited and kept a promise he made when he was only 10 years old. And in the palace on the hill, where once a cruel king had sat counting everything he had taken, a new king now sat with his door open, listening to whoever needed to speak. There were no rules against talking, no rules against complaining, no rules against telling the truth. any person who wanted to come and speak to the king could come and speak to the king. The village of Onam was not perfect, no place ever is, but it was alive again, and it was free. And Emeka, who had been a little boy standing by a palace window making a silent promise to the dark village below, looked out now at a village full of light and noise and life, and he smiled. He had kept his promise.